people
quorum,
here.
I'll call the
Like,
meeting
yeah,
to
there
order.
are.
Mr. Vice Secretary.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting serves as the board's annual organizational meeting, and in accordance with board policy 9321, I actually preside over this meeting for a very short period of time until the board elects a chair. Before we do that, I'd like to welcome Pat Fedor and Michelle Devine to the Board of Education, so welcome to both of you. I need to appoint an acting secretary to assist with the process if need be. I'd like to appoint Amanda Gates Lamoth to be acting secretary. Excellent. Now we're going to have the election for the chair. Per Robert's Rules of Order, nominations do not need a second. The floor is now open for nominations. Are there any nominations for chair of the Waterford Board of Education?
I nominate Craig Merriman.
Okay. Do you accept that nomination, Mr. Merriman? Okay. Are there any other nominations for chair? Are there any other nominations for chair? Hearing none, nominations are closed. The person must be elected, in this case, Mr. Merriman, by a majority of those present. It would take 5 votes for him to be elected chair. So at this point, I would ask those in the affirmative supporting Mr. Merriman to respond by saying yay. Opposed would be nay. All those in favor of the nomination or the election of Craig Merriman as chair of the Waterford Board of Education signify by saying yay.
Yay.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Merriman. So we're gonna do some shifting of seats.
He's like, I'm out.
Yeah,
So I
no
don't-
time
might be
to
easier
rest. Get up
Everybody just
here.
move down a seat and Craig can kind of end up with Marcia's chair and do it that way. No, we'll move down one and you'll end up with Marcia's chair. Now that the board has elected a chair, the chair will preside over the election of a board secretary and the remainder of the meeting. And at this point, I'll hand it off to you to open up the floor for nominations for
Okay,
secretary.
we need a nomination for secretary.
I'd like to nominate Amanda Gates Lamoth.
Second? Oh, we don't.
Don't need a second.
Okay. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Okay, so all those in favor of, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstain? Okay, any public comment? Okay. So for to our visitors, we have our staff here, as always. That's it. So, we had, a music presentation scheduled tonight from the Chamber Choir, but they're not here because they had to reschedule their concert to this evening, so, we're gonna reschedule them to another date. So next up is the consent agenda. Any questions on this, any comments, additions, deletions?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Well, second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, next up is correspondence. I don't know if anyone was able to, looked over the couple of pieces that we did get. Got a card from Ms. Shoemaker. We sent a card to her, on the passing of her mother. And then there's a cute card from a great also, there was a retired teacher that passed away, Ms. Dixon. She had a long battle with cancer, so our condolences to her and her family. Okay, Superintendent's report.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Superintendent's report tonight, we have two presentations. First one is a presentation from Great Neck Elementary School this year. You're gonna hear about a new approach or a way of working with students. I think what you'll get out of this, it is certainly part of our ongoing social-emotional learning work here in the district. You've heard terms in the past such as second step, zones of regulation, PBIS, and other areas. Love and Logic extends that work in the district, and it's really been well received by staff already. So I'm excited for you to hear about it, learn how it came to fruition, because that's an interesting piece of this as well. So without further ado, I'll introduce Principal Billy Shea, and she'll take it from here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I'd like to introduce Wendy McCabe, who is a special education teacher at Great Neck and instrumental in leading our support center at Great Neck. So Mrs. McCabe is really going to tell you about Love and Logic and how we're infusing those strategies into our SEL initiative. So as you may recall, as Tom just pointed out, the district and school goals really support social and emotional health of our students. And last year, across all three elementary schools, we implemented Second Step, which was really a curriculum tool, teaching things like respect and responsibility, perseverance, problem solving, and teachers really infused that into their morning meetings and take advantage of teachable moments every single day. We also implemented a program called Zones of Regulation, and that was really about giving students kind of a vocabulary or a language on how to describe what they might be feeling and talking to them about when they're in a really good place, they're most available for learning. So those were the two programs. In addition to that, and in addition to our efforts to always want to continuously improve upon our approaches to how we are handling sometimes some challenging behaviors, Mrs. McCabe actually applied for a grant, Fund for Teachers grant last year, and in April was awarded that grant of about $3,500. That grant allowed her to travel out to Colorado. She did 5 days of intensive training with the founders of the Love and Logic Institute, and the benefit for us in her receiving that grant is she's really taken on a teacher leadership role and is kind of turnkeying that professional development to help our staff. So far she's delivered four Love and Logic training. One was canceled yesterday due to snow, but there are 9 modules, and essentially it is going to be rolled out slowly, but each module kind of gives the teachers that are taking the training kind of a month to try the strategies out, see how that works, and then come back together. So we'll talk to you a little bit about that. So Love and Logic training, really it's embedded PD for us, but it's really a research-based approach, and it's really for adults. So students are not going to really hear the term Love and Logic. That's really for the adults and the approach that we take.
And basically, Love and Logic is not a program. It's not a bunch of rules. It's nothing that the kids are ever going to see. As Billy said, it's something that is for teachers, and it's a way for teachers to gain some new strategies for working with challenging behaviors. Love and Logic came out of challenging behaviors and kind of how can we address these kids, and research found that it's really all about building a relationship, and that by building that relationship with the kids, they're going to be more apt to respond to you. So that's really the basis of Love and Logic. But it also is about letting kids make mistakes, but being consistent with the consequences of those mistakes. That's the logic part. The love is that relationship and allowing them to make the mistakes, and the logic is there's consequences for those mistakes, and we're going to support you in dealing with those consequences. We're not going to rescue you from those consequences. And that children learn best from people that they think care about them, because kids don't care what you know until they know you care. So that's really where Love and Logic starts. And then it allows teachers to kind of have a little more confidence with some of these challenging behaviors. There are times where students can do some things in a classroom that teachers aren't really sure what to do with that. And this gives teachers the confidence to take that stress out of it by giving them all of these tools. None of them are things that teachers have to do. It allows the teacher to kind of be themselves and figure out what parts of this Love and Logic works for them.
So who is behind it? The original two founders were Jim Fay, who was a former school principal, and this Love and Logic Institute really grew out of some of the challenges he faced and his approach being very authoritative, not really working so well. So sought out Foster Klein, who is a psychiatrist, and really learned some of those strategies, and it grew from there. So Love and Logic has been around since 1977, so it's over 4 decades. And then Jim Fay's son, Charles Fay, also a school psychologist, decided to join. So there are 3. They've done presentations or taken over 1 million teachers kind of through their Love and Logic Institute. Really started more on the West Coast and is kind of moving its way this way. So we're thankful for Mrs. McCabe going out there and kind of bringing that to us. Current fun fact, for those of you who know Microsoft's Bill Gates, of his top 10 books, Love and Logic is on that list because he utilized that for a lot of his parenting strategies. So he talks a lot about how those strategies were helpful for him.
In the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they talk about some of the Love and Logic strategies, and if you go on there into their education parts, they have links right to the Love and Logic Institute.
So why does it work? It utilizes humor and hope, and it specifically is based in empathy, building those positive relationships. And it also ensures that we're always reminded to protect kind of the dignity of students and adults as well, and give them the tools that they need to deal with some of those challenging behaviors. There are very specific boundaries and limits that are delivered to children, and we're really teaching consequences, problem solving, and helping to students make healthier decisions and make better choices. So when you're starting this young at the elementary age, those mistakes are smaller, and so if you can teach them those problem solving skills when the stakes are higher and the mistakes can be larger later in life, hopefully they have those skills to make better decisions. So what are the 9 essential Love and Logic skills?
One of the best things about this is it allows the teacher to still be who they are. You can still have your personality. You don't have to check that at the door when you decide to be a Love and Logic teacher. These are things that you can kind of pick and choose from, and it's separated into the trainings that I provide into 9 modules. And what those modules are is sets of skills, sets of strategies that teachers can use, can try out, can kind of make their own. The first one that we start with is neutralizing student arguing, and a lot of teachers are like, well, I don't argue with students, so why would I even need to learn that? But actually, there are some really gifted students who are really good at roping you into an argument when you don't even know you're arguing about something, but when you're providing all of that extra reaction and giving them extra explanation for something that they already know the answer to, they've actually won you into an argument. So this particular module gives a lot of examples of how we can avoid that, and in the best interest of the student to be respectful to them, but also be able to continue that classroom instruction. Something very powerful at Great Neck we've started with this year is delayed consequences. The teachers have been really kind of latching on to that, and we've done a lot of work with that. I haven't even done the official full module with the teachers, but just in our talking, it's something that's been very, very powerful. And in most of our undergraduate programs, we learned that you give an immediate consequence. A child has a behavior, you give a consequence. And Love and Logic says, you know what, these aren't rats and mice and dogs that we're training. These are kids that can think. We need to use that thinking to our advantage. So when a child does something, typically you're not approving of it, you don't enjoy what they just did. Instead of giving that immediate consequence, delaying the consequence allows you to make sure it's logical, make sure that it's going to be what you need it to be, allows you to delay it and say, you know what, I'm going to have to do something about that, but not right now, don't worry about it, we'll talk later. In essence, what have you done? You've made that kid think about their behavior. You told them not to, but that means they're probably going to. That gives you, the teacher, time to talk to an administrator, talk to other teachers, figure out what would be the best consequence in that situation. It's also worked very well for some of my students have trouble in their special area classes when they leave my classroom. And in the past, they have trouble in PE. I march down there and I take that situation and I give a consequence. And in essence, what I did was steal the power from the PE teacher. I took away that teacher's power, and now that student isn't going to respond to that teacher the same way. So by allowing the PE teacher to delay the consequence, he can come to me and say, what are we gonna do about this? We come up with it, and then he delivers that consequence. And it makes it much more powerful in the future. And all of those consequences are delivered with empathy, which a lot of teachers says, well, it sounds kind of corny. I don't know if I can do that, but it takes a little bit of practice. You can't do it with sarcasm. If you do it with sarcasm, it negates the whole thing. Jim Fay, throughout the week I was in Colorado, I must have heard him say, what a bummer. And that was his empathetic statement. No matter what a child did, that's how he responded. And it takes away the anger component. When you tell a child, stop doing that, they're gonna get angry right back at you, because that's what you've brought into the equation. But if you respond with, oh, what a bummer, about the choice they made, it really takes the wind out of their sail and allows you to work on it. The recovery process, that's when you're having kind of some extreme behavior where it's really disrupting the educational environment. Love and Logic is about preserving that educational environment for the majority of those kids. So that recovery could look like a place within the room where they're gonna go get themselves together and you're not gonna deal with them until they're ready. It could be a place outside of the classroom, but it's not a timeout. It's not a place where they're gonna process and learn from their behavior. They're just taking a break, and it will be dealt with further later. There's some specific strategies for developing positive relationships with those really challenging kids that are really oppositional and they might be a little more difficult to develop a relationship with. This gives you strategies. Those are the kids that need the relationship the most. Those oppositional kids, they're the ones that are craving it. So there's strategies for that, how to set limits. Setting limits is if you tell a child, stop talking, can you make them stop talking? No, they're gonna keep talking. You can't necessarily enforce that, but you can say something like, I will line up students for recess that are quiet. I can enforce that statement, but I'm getting the same result out of that, which is be quiet. Using choices to prevent power struggles, we kind of look at these kids that have challenging behaviors have a need for control, and that need for control can be helped with choices that don't make a difference to us. We can give them a lot of little choices, so when the stakes are bigger and we need them to do something, they're more apt to do it because they've been given some control earlier in the day. The preventative interventions is a whole toolbox for teachers with 24 different strategies, kind of in a hierarchy of what you can do when there's some challenging behavior in your classroom. Because there's nothing worse as a teacher than having something happen and feeling stressed out that you don't know what to do about it, besides call someone else for help, which teaches the kids you have no control. So this gives them some things to think about and helps kind of bring the fun back in teaching when you don't have that stress part. And then the hardest one for me, which I would have last year said I was really good at, which I wasn't, is guiding students to solve their own problems. I thought I was doing that, and what I was doing is solving the problems for the student. And I was teaching all of these students to rely on me because I'm a good problem solver. So now I am teaching them to solve their own problems.
Wendy, with respect to number 6,
Mhm.
you used an example of lining students up for recess based on their behavior. But we know that we cannot use recess as a disciplinary tool. So how do you square that?
If you tell a class, remember you have a relationship with each and every one of these students in your classroom. These are elementary kids that are excited to go to recess. If you say, I'm gonna line up kids that are quiet and ready to go to recess, 99% of that class is gonna be quiet, and you start lining them up. And by then you got 19 lined up, you might have 3 that aren't ready. You say, start following Mrs. So-and-so's class down. Those other 3 kids are gonna be pretty quiet pretty quick. It's pretty effective to get them to do that. If not, we can't take away recess. That's not something that we can do, and the students will tell us that. And we say, oh, what a bummer, you weren't able to be quiet. I'm gonna have to do something about that, but not right now. It's time for your recess. You go to recess, we'll talk about it later. And then there'll be something that is a consequence for that later. Again, recess isn't something that we take away.
And then it gets them thinking about what is that consequence going to be, and then hopefully gets them thinking about solving problems. The other shift that we've made, and this was an interesting one, so Wendy talked to you about delaying consequences. So it gives us as a team to really think about how can we individualize what that consequence might be for this particular child for whatever that behavior was, and taking into account everything that we know about that child. It might be something that I kind of go in as the administrator and sit when that consequence is delivered, but the important part is it's the teacher that is typically delivering that consequence, and then I'm the support. Because if you have that mindset where I'm gonna send you out of the classroom and, you know, you're gonna go to the principal's office because the principal is gonna be able to solve that problem, it's a similar scenario.
That teaches the child, I can't deal with that problem and I don't want to deal with that problem. We want that kid to know we do wanna deal with that problem because we care about them and we wanna work through that with them. And that works for paraprofessionals as well. I was big on, I see something happening with a teacher and a para and I step in and I fix that problem, and all that did is create kind of a hierarchy within the classroom. So now if there's something with a paraprofessional, that paraprofessional might delay the consequence, come say, what are we gonna do about this? We figure it out and then they deliver that consequence. And it's really taken away a lot of the, I'm gonna tell Mrs. McCabe attitude within the classroom, and it kind of shows that everyone is respecting everyone.
So one of the things that some of this training for us is helping us to do, we're very fortunate that we have a very solid social emotional tools, and we have a very solid foundation for supporting students. One of the things, once we get through probably 4 or 5 modules this year, starting our year off next year with really working with our teams to kind of establish those core beliefs, and then using the Love and Logic strategies to kind of support those core beliefs. And really what we're trying to do by turnkeying this training to people across the district is really have consistent techniques in how we are interacting with our students, making sure that we are empathetic and building relationships with them and keeping it positive. And the delaying the consequence piece also takes the emotion out of it for the student who might be in a struggle at that time or kind of heightened, and so you give some time between that. They can kind of calm down, kind of process that, and also teachers in the room, right? Because we're human too, and when some of these big behaviors happen, sometimes you kind of need a moment to just kind of step back, so it works really well for everyone. So far, we've done 3 different trainings, a couple on the larger PD day that we had in November. So the response so far from our faculty has been really positive, which I'm very excited for Wendy, but 90% or above felt that the workshop, the material, the manner in which it was delivered, kind of the concrete strategies and what to do in very different situations. There's some scenario-based components to the training as well, but they stated that it was meaningful to their work, that they were going to try to use those strategies and see how that was going to impact them in their everyday work in the classroom, and that they would recommend this workshop and these strategies. And so there was probably a whole page worth of feedback that demonstrated interest to kind of continue training with the modules. The nice part about it is it's really for adults, and it's really a very kind of slow rollout just to continually build a teacher's toolbox on different strategies you can use for different types of behaviors.
Billy, question.
Yes.
I don't remember what exactly it was, but at one of our meetings in the last year, this, excuse me, this card was handed out with these questions. Do you remember that?
That was the Clarke Lane program.
Yeah, how does that square, this program square with that, which
This
that
would-
program seems to be,
I think it might
have an immediate intervention when you had some misbehavior in the classroom. You know, how you made the other student feel, what you could do to make that student feel better.
Restorative practices.
Yeah, so how does this square? Because it seems to me that they're at odds. One's a more immediate thing, and this is kind of you're putting it on the shelf.
Restorative practices dovetail very well into Love and Logic. Restorative practices look at what was the impact of that behavior on others and how you can restore those relationships. And that can be done with the Love and Logic strategies. These are kind of what the teacher's gonna say and how the teacher's gonna respond to these behaviors. But if that behavior happened where it caused a problem in a relationship and something happened where it was negative towards another, absolutely a restorative circle, which is a little meeting where you kind of go over that and you talk to the person that was impacted as well as the perpetrator of the behavior. All of that can happen with Love and Logic strategies. Love and Logic strategies is kind of the way that the teacher is going to interact with the students as it's happening. The restorative part happens later. That's not something that you stop your whole class and say, we're gonna have, and I mean, if it was a huge issue with the whole class, maybe you would, but typically it's not something that is involving your entire class.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Well, I think the point might be too, is every child is different, and
every individual is gonna react differently, and the more options a teacher has to deal with 34 different personalities, I think the better off the teacher's gonna be, and the more stable the classroom's gonna be. And you learn over time. You don't know the kids the first week or first month, and it takes time. Because you'll try something and you're gonna say that night, oh boy, that didn't work.
That's
You're
exactly
gonna
what Jim
know.
Fay says, is, you know what, you just try it,
Oh.
and not everything is going to work. Jim
Right.
used to teach by yelling when he started teaching, and, you know, it worked for quite a while, and then these kids started yelling back. And the horrible things back then, like not tucking in their shirt, that was like a big offense back when he started teaching. And they would say, no, I'm not tucking it in, and that was like a huge big issue, like he didn't know what to do. And that's when he started observing where, you know, how come he's not doing that in so-and-so's classroom? He's tucking that in for that teacher, and she's not even yelling. Why is that? And that's kind of where it started.
You mentioned the morning meeting. What happens at the morning meeting? You talked about that in the beginning.
Every classroom throughout the building starts with a morning meeting, and it might be 10 minutes or so to kind of set expectations for the day, what things are gonna be accomplished, what tasks are on their to-do list for the day. But they also kind of weave in some of that social-emotional work as well, so they might be working on things like respect or responsibility or perseverance or the importance of goal setting, or it might be a scenario based for, you know, problem solving or developing a social skill, and that will give each classroom student the opportunity to kind of contribute, to hear that, or even sometimes kind of work in partners to solve a scenario based problem. So that's kind of the curriculum piece of it. And the zones of regulation is more of the language-based part of it, and the love and logic component is really the approach that we as adults take to helping our students be the best they can be.
Is Great Neck the only school that's using this?
No, we have, on the PD day, I did a workshop for all of the special education teachers and paraprofessionals in the district, pre-K to 12. And right now I am providing modules kind of at Great Neck, and then I'm providing district-wide with a few teachers from all 5 schools, and that'll happen once a month at Great Neck. So we're kind of bringing it out slowly, getting some core people in different schools. It's something you need to kind of be interested in to really move forward with, and if you get a few people doing it effectively, it brings others on board.
How many modules are there?
9.
Any other questions?
This is from the therapeutic world. This is everything that you would do as a parent with a parent and a child. So it's very nice to see that it's working in the school systems, and you know, for someone that teaches the parent-child perspective, I'm kind of surprised that it's not being done or what, you know. So, but it's nice to see that they're overlapping in the school system.
And it helps work with those families. I have one mother in particular that we've been emailing almost every day on just some strategies and plugging holes in some things she's doing, and I'm doing the work together. And it really is the things that, and how I'm approaching it at school is exactly how she wants to approach it at home, and it's the best of both worlds.
And to use it even at the middle school or high school level would work just as well, you know. As
I'm
the
trying it with my
elementary
16-year-old at home.
school. Yeah, it will work.
And our social worker and school psychologist have kind of surveyed some of our parents and looking for what they need, but it really does build kind of a nice school-home connection, and that we could all be utilizing the same strategies with our students, their children.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Billy mentioned it up front that this really came to us through Wendy writing a grant proposal for Fund for Teachers. We've had 7 teachers, I believe, over the last 3 years, and it's just another example of, you know, our staff always going the extra mile, because at $3,500 to go to Colorado, it's probably something we wouldn't be able to fund within the context of our operating budget, but it's just one of many examples of our folks going the extra mile. So thank you for taking that extra step. Next item under superintendent's report is I thought it would be appropriate for Mr. Hauser from the high school to give an update on the NEASC process. You might recall it was about a year ago that we gave you an update. NEASC did change their process, and we had our collaborative conference visit last November with the expectation that our actual site visit will be next December. So in that 2-year window, there are things to do and prepare for that visit, and the purpose of the collaborative conference is to give feedback to the high school where NEASC thinks the high school should go. So with new board members and also a year to go before our official visit, no more appropriate time than to get an update from our high school
All right,
principal.
thank you very much, Tom. We're actually 1 week inside of a year from our real reaccreditation visit. And with a number of new people, I want to start by very briefly talking a little bit about what the accreditation process is. Now, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges is the regional accrediting organization for all high schools in New England. There's also an optional accreditation process for middle and elementary schools, but for high schools, it's pretty much mandatory. One of those questions on the Common App when they're applying to college is, are you graduating from an accredited high school? We don't want to be the first school in Connecticut to have them check, no. So we go through, it's a 10-year accreditation improvement cycle, and for decades it was pretty much the same. There would be minor tweaks around the edges every few years, but it was once every 10 years, you stopped everything you were doing for a year and focused on meeting all 7 of their standards, and then you brought in a huge team, you did a great big show, and it basically, that was your reset button for 10 years. You'd do some follow-up reports afterwards, but it was a once every 10 years type of situation. For schools that are being reaccredited starting in 2020, that would include us, they have completely revamped the process to where it's now a 2-step process over about a 3 to 4 year span. They've also narrowed the standards to 5. And we are the second cohort of schools that are going through the updated version. So we really are learning as we go. There's some really fundamental things about the process that I'm going to hedge on my information about, such as how many people will be on the visiting team. They've gone back and forth several times. A small team, a large team, a medium-sized team. It could depend on the population of your school or the size of your school or all kinds of stuff. Whereas it used to just be, there will be 16. So we've got, like I said, the 5 standards for accreditation. Used to be 7. They took 3 of them, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, lumped them all together, and they call that student learning. Everything that they want you to look at really focuses on, are students learning? How are we making sure what they're learning? How are they learning it? How are we sure that they're learning it? And everything else connects to it some way. Learning culture has to do with a lot of school climate and leadership within the school. Professional practices really focuses on professional development and how we're training our faculty. Learning support looks at things like special education, guidance and counseling, student support services, the library, and learning resources, that's you guys. How does the community as a whole support the school and what we're trying to do? So the timeline, we started a little bit over a year ago. In spring of 2018, we did, actually almost 2 years ago now, that was what we call the self-assessment process. They have a self-reflection committee that you have to establish that involves, it was about a third of our faculty was actively involved in that. We've got about another 10% of our faculty is on our steering committee. And they had to look at all of those standards and come up with a self-reflection. Where are we in terms of our adherence to those standards? And identify for ourselves, this is the real new part. We had to identify for ourselves where we felt we wanted to put the most work into. It used to just be you do your overview of the standards, send that off to the NEASC, they'd come, they'd look at what you're doing, and they'd tell you what you should be working on. There really was very little input from the school, so that's been a huge improvement in the process. So we did that in the spring and then into the summer of 2018. In 2018-2019 school year, we had 4 representatives from the NEASC come for what they call the collaborative conference in November. this was the other new part of it. They came, they looked at all of the information we had about our adherence to the standards, but mostly they wanted to focus on what we had thought we should be working on. They give you feedback on those, and we looked at the feedback, we tweaked the school growth plan based on that. You have fresh eyes come in, they always see something that you didn't quite see, or they see it through a different lens. You know, it's having somebody else come over to your house is exactly when they'll notice that there's one mantle you didn't dust. And so they give us feedback. We really improved our school growth plan based on that feedback. And now, from the end of last year through this year, this is the do the work year. This is where we're really implementing that school growth plan, and as we go along, gathering evidence of its impact on student learning. We'll continue that through the summer into the fall of next year, and mark your calendar, board members, December 6th through 8th, you do have a role in this, will be the NEASC accreditation visit itself. This is when they come back, and instead of the old system where they're gonna go through all of the standards again, they've already figured out, we're pretty much in alignment with the standards. What they wanna see is now a growth model as opposed to an adherence model. What did we do based on those areas we identified for growth? How did we use the feedback they gave us about those areas for growth? And what have we done as an organization to tackle those areas for growth? So this is really going to focus on that question. What has changed since the last time we were here? This is always fun. This is the week that a principal doesn't sleep and ages by 3 years. And this is the part that has followed me throughout my career. This will be the 5th time I've been through this as either a teacher or administrator. I have to stay here forever now so that I can get 10 years between them. And this is where it is going to get a little bit fuzzy, because at first they said we're going to scale this down to about 6 people. Then they've had a few teams go out now piloting this, and they're realizing that few people probably isn't going to work. They don't want to scale it all the way back up to the 16, but they're not sure, based on different sizes of schools, based on different recommendations from up in this phase, how many it will be. So I've built in probably a little bit more than I will eventually need into my budget for next year to support this, because I'd rather have the funding to get all of them a hotel room and dinner while they're here, and then return some to you guys, than to find out I under budgeted. Now I want to tell you a little bit about what we have now got as those 4 goal areas, those 4 elements of our school growth plan. Last year it was 5. There was one that was very sort of take care of it and it's done, having to do with some consistencies in how our departments were writing their curriculum. That one's been taken care of, and so now all 4 of these come from our self-reflection and from the feedback of the collaborative conference, and they're a next step from the work we were doing last year. So goal 1 has to do with that vision of the graduate. And our goal here is to align our instructional and assessment practices with the transferable skills emphasized in the vision of the graduate. Now, if you look at our strategic plan, and there's a poster of it back there, there's some very nice, very long academic, civic, and social skills that really spell out exactly what we're looking for from kids. However, they're a little bit too long for people to hold in their memory, so the DAT team has been doing a lot of work, the whole K-12 group. We've gotten community feedback on this as well, and we're working with the Great Schools Partnership and the League of Innovative Schools as consultants on this. We've boiled all of those down at this point to 5 key ideas: communication, research and understanding, critical thinking, civic responsibility, and self-direction. And actually, Craig is leading a workshop tomorrow with K through 12 teachers and principals to really start looking at sort of the measurables on these. How will we be able to see that those are happening in an elementary classroom, a middle school classroom, a high school classroom, and how would we measure that? So we're coming along very well on that. The next one is helping struggling learners. Like most schools in Connecticut, we do very well by that top tier of our students. We get them into some great schools, we get them a lot of college credit while they're in high school. We do very well for our most struggling learners. Kathy and the special ed department do phenomenal things for our students. But how do we know we're challenging all kids in the classroom. And that's what this goal is all about, implementing high leverage, and it's a little teacher talky, but implementing high leverage, best instructional practices in every classroom, along with tier 1 intervention strategies. In other words, as we see kids struggling in the class, how quickly do we recognize that? How quickly do we jump in and try something different with them in order to improve academic performance among high needs and at-risk students? Again, our consultant from the Great Schools Partnership has done a lot of work with us on laying the foundation for that. And this has been an ongoing focus of our faculty meetings and professional days throughout the year. Every one of our faculty meetings so far this year has had teachers sitting down, working with each other, either looking at specific instructional practices to get towards this, or looking at specific student results. If you don't know exactly who's struggling and you don't see the patterns in that, you can't figure out what's that best strategy going to be. So we've really put a lot of time into focusing on those 2 key questions. The next, and I don't think this is a surprise to much of anybody, there's a mental health crisis with teens in America today. And there are a lot of reasons for it. And what we know is it impacts their ability to be available for learning, their ability to be the best that they can be in school. And this was actually the one area, and I'm very proud of this, in all of our other areas that we'd identified as our goal areas to focus on with the NEASC Collaborative Conference, every one of them came back with we're gonna echo what you had to say, and we're adding this piece that we want you to focus on. For our supports for social emotional health and mental health of our students, they just said, good job, keep going. They didn't have any suggestions for how we should change that goal, which I think speaks volumes about our faculty and about our care team, our counseling services, those types of things at the high school. So last year's goal did say support student social emotional needs. We added continue to, and we added this part here, with an emphasis on students whose social and emotional deficits interfere with their success in an academic setting. We really wanted to define for ourselves, when we say social emotional needs, what exactly do we mean by that? Who is that target population? This really aligns with both the strategic plan and Board of Education goals about social emotional health. Last year, through some grant funding that Kathy was able to secure for us, we were able to add a social worker starting this fall. That addition has been wonderful for us. Having that one extra person who's available to really focus on those chronic absentee issues, chronic behavior issues, and kids with more significant needs has really allowed us to expand what we're doing for kids. And our care team, that's collaborative education and collaborative accountability and restorative education, restorative practices at the high school level, what we used to call a student assistance team, has really been leading the work on this. That's all of our school counselors, our social workers and psychologists, our school administrators, and a couple of regular education teachers. We meet weekly to really look at kids in crisis and the services we offer them. And then last but not least is the use of professional time. If you've ever wondered, what do they do every Thursday afternoon in their professional learning communities, or PLCs, as we call them? We're using those really to focus on improved student learning. At the high school, traditionally we've met primarily within our own departments, but as people have started talking about the things that we really want to do, we're realizing there are times when we want to talk across departments. And so the last PLC of every month is now what we call a flex PLC. Perhaps instead of all of the English teachers getting together, it's going to be all 9th grade teachers, or it's going to be all teachers of AP classes, or it's going to be all teachers who have a co-teacher all getting together to talk about co-teaching strategies. They're focusing on lesson design and its role in identifying and addressing student needs. We really want our teachers to recognize who the experts are within our faculty. That's one of the goals of the Flex PLCs, is it gives them an opportunity to start thinking about each other as experts and getting time to connect with each other as experts and sharing those best practices that are already going on. And our department chairs are essential in leading this work. They're the ones who really organize all of that PLC work for us. So those are the goals we're working on. Like I said, this year is about really tackling all of these 4 areas and tracking our success with it. Are we really meeting the needs of struggling students, social, emotionally, and in a more academic setting? Are we incorporating that vision of the graduate into the work of the school? And how are we using our professional time to make sure that all of the time we have available is used to direct our efforts to improve student learning? So, this is something that doesn't work without board support. I do want to thank you all for that. And like I said, if you haven't done it already, mark those calendars, December 6th through 8th. There will be definitely an interview panel where they'll want to meet with board members, talk to you about your vision for the school and your goals and your concerns about the work we do here in Waterford for teenagers.
Could we get a copy of this sent to the board members? The
Absolutely.
presentation, please?
I'll have, I saw many of you either taking pictures or taking notes, so we'll include it in Friday note tomorrow.
How many department chairs are there at the high school?
Our department chairs group is about 12.
And you said you had this addition of the social worker. So
Yes.
with the addition, how many do you have there now?
We have 2 social workers, 1.5 school psychologists, and 4 guidance counselors.
Thank you.
Do the academic coaches play any role in this at all, or is it just the department heads?
The academic coaches, we've got a literacy coach and a math coach, and the literacy coach works across several departments. She also happens to be our English department chair, so there's sort of that dual role. She's in a leadership position within her own PLC, but also a resource for other PLCs. Our math coach is a classroom teacher for half of his assignment, and he works closely with the rest of his department. We've got a number of reasonably new to the profession or new to our school system math teachers. So he's doing a lot of work with them to ensure as much consistency as possible throughout that department. Also, he's evaluating a lot of resources for us. We're in the process of piloting and selecting from those pilots some new resources for math instruction at the high school.
You mentioned it in the context of the math coach, but it's also true for the English coach. It is a portion of the role,
Yes,
job,
yes.
not their whole job.
And we also have a third of an FTE technology coach who we share with the middle school, who's essential in a lot of the technology improvements that we're doing. Right now, particularly the use of decision ed and teachers' understanding of what they can do with it and how that can help guide their efforts to identify and meet the needs of kids.
So aside from the 1/3 coach, there's only 2 coaches at the high school, the literacy coach and the math coach?
Yes, and they are each half-time classroom teacher and half-time coach, so it's 1 FTE of coaching time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think the part of this, I'm proud of all of our schools, but I think what you see in this presentation is a strong through line between the goals that you all set on a yearly basis, the district strategic plan, school growth plan, which ultimately funnels down to administrator goals and teacher goals. Strong through line for all the work going on in the district. As Andre pointed out, sometimes an accreditation process might be a little detached from the actual work a high school is doing. I think this new process really gets at what are you working on, how are you gonna get better at it, and meet the needs of more students, so thank you
Yes,
for
that was one of the criticisms of the old process was basically the work of the school stopped for a year while you did a lot of research to prove you were doing the work you should be. By limiting the number of faculty members who have to be on the self-study committees, they've allowed the work of the school to continue and actually guide the process much more effectively than they did in the past. So although we are flying blind a little bit, and that kind of excitement is not always what you're looking for running a high school, it is a much better process than it used to be, and it's really been very helpful in driving positive change at the high school.
Thank you so much. Couple other updates for the board. I want to thank Quaker Hill for the art here in the room and out in the hallway. Always appreciate that. You obviously are aware we're in the middle of budget development process for the FY21 budget. Joe, Craig, and myself met all day on Monday with the various directors and principals and assistant principals to review their budget submissions, ask questions, push back, rationale. And now really it's getting all of that information into the system and begin to make some decisions in preparation of presenting the budget to all of you in January/February. Fall athletics have come to a conclusion as recently as this week. Hard to believe, and winter season is gearing up. But good shout outs to girls volleyball and football, who both made state tournament play. Winter concert season is among us. Supposed to be tonight, last night, pushed to tonight. I encourage you to get out there, both the board and the general public watching online. Winter concert season is among us. We talk about grants a lot. I want to highlight grants received by Great Neck and Quaker Hill within the last month. Great Neck received a $1,500 grant from the local Walmart, a community grant application to fund an enrichment program focusing on photography and literacy. Very cool. Look forward to that. Quaker Hill also received a grant from the Walmart Community Grant Application, $250 for technology and innovation, and will help the school create an innovation zone where students will have access to coding equipment, a 3D printer, and other materials to work on collaborative projects. So we don't only rely on local, state, and federal funding. Our teachers are pursuing those dollars. Always like to highlight staff and school achievements. Want to compliment Quaker Hill for hosting a regional technology roundtable group here from the technology integration specialists, technology coaches, and teachers interested in technology from across the region. And they spent a morning at Quaker Hill, so kudos to Quaker Hill. I want to compliment Joe Macrino, who was recently featured and interviewed on a Connecticut Association of Schools podcast on early childhood programs. So compliments to Joe for that. Our district tech committee is in the process of renewing and revising the district tech plan. You might recall that the state no longer requires approval of that at the district or board level. We still feel it's important to have a roadmap, both on the infrastructure side of technology, but also where is the classroom going and teaching and learning going in the context of technology. And we look forward to sharing that updated district tech plan later in this school year. Update on K-8 recruitment and our partner districts. Mr. Hauser's been in contact with all three of our partner districts and has been presenting to their 8th graders. Lottery applications from those three towns, Norwich, Bosra, and Franklin, are due middle of January. You might recall, due to the process last year in presenting at boards, we really didn't get to access to those 8th graders until April, May. With that said, we did have 5 students enrolled from Norwich as of October 1st. And as I said at the time, that is money that will go directly to the town general fund. So we'll keep you posted on that as lottery applications come due in January. Certainly, if those seats aren't filled, we accept applications throughout the course of the year. Want to highlight a lighting upgrade project you might notice when you visit Clarke Lane. Mr. Minor, our Director of Facilities, was able to secure very advantageous pricing and rebate opportunities to upgrade the lights at Clarke Lane in common areas such as hallways and foyers, similar to the lights in the hallway here at Town Hall. They're lighting panels. It will be not only an energy savings, but a tremendous savings on staff labor time from changing light bulbs. So that project is underway, and besides the efficiency benefits, it really modernizes the look of the school. Mr. Sachs, any words?
Everything, you can see everything for the first time. I think it helps with behavior too. It just brightened up the school and looks super modern. It's great.
So, compliments to our team working on that. Something that I'll be bringing to the board at a future meeting, two future things. Going back to the K-8 partner districts, we'll set the tuition rate for next school year at this January meeting. And then I am working with the police chief on revisions to the MOU surrounding school resource officers to really address some enhancements in technology. Some of our schools will begin to have technology where police officers could view school cameras on their cell phones and things like that in the case of an emergency. And the MOU will really reflect some of the updates around when they should access that video and setting some parameters for that. So I look forward to bringing that to the board in the near future. And Mr. Chair, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Tom. Committee reports, policy, Marcia?
We didn't meet.
Okay, finance, I think, Chris?
We didn't meet. If that, I don't know about it.
We did not.
And I guess this kind of ties into two things, because I guess it covers school building committee too, is the softball field. That is moving forward. Everyone is hopeful that we'll be somewhat ahead of schedule or get something sometime this year, so. There's 2 more meetings that has to go through. There's the Conservation Commission on the 12th, and I think it's the 16th, it's Monday, is the planning and zoning. Once it gets through that, then we're good. We should be able to continue forward and break ground and all that fun stuff. Any reports on the liaison, delegates, other reports? And then we have Kenny Hall here from Parks and Rec. Did you have anything else at all? Thank you. New business. So we need to appoint a member to the Town Retirement Commission to replace Mim. Do we have any nominations for that?
Marcia Benvenuti. I think you'd be great on that, Marcia. Come on.
Any interested in that?
As long as I can be on the finance and policy, and I don't mind taking another one, but I really, my heart is in finance and policy.
And do we need a second for this one?
We should read a motion and ask for a second.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so yeah, we'll need a motion read on this one, if you don't mind.
I move that the Board of Education approve the committee appointment of Marcia Benvenuti as our board's representative to the Town Retirement Commission for the year term ending on 12/31/2020.
Thank you. Second on that?
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Congratulations. And then, next we need to look over, the committee assignments, and, we need to have everyone, submit their preferences. You might want to list them in order of what you prefer first to, Caroline, and then we'll sort that out. You know, as soon as you could, before the 10th of January, so we can get that all in line for, the next meetings and going forward. So that's it for new business. And before we go further, I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for trusting me to be the chair. I really appreciate that, and I think, the only way I'll be successful is with your support and your input, and I'm looking forward to it. I really want to thank Greg for everything he done as our previous chair, did a fantastic job.
Thank you, Greg.
So I feel like I got big shoes to fill between Greg and Jody and Kathleen and those that came before him, so I was gonna say something before, but there was so many things going through my head when I sat down. You know, it's like just a lot kind of hit me all at once, so thank you. So we're gonna need a motion to go into executive session. Who do we
Wait,
need to-
I have one question
Yes.
on the committees. School building committee.
Yeah.
Why do we have that? Like, it makes sense when you're building schools, but I don't understand, it just seems to be just another layer of bureaucracy to get through things that we really need to get done. I don't know.
Well,
It's a
for right
statutory.
now, the real purpose is.
Cause I'm
is
new, I
public.
don't know the history of this
Right.
committee, so I'm coming from
Well,
just
right
a-
now, the softball field is the big thing going on with that.
yeah, but
As
we
far as
wouldn't
the-
have
do you-
needed
Greg,
that.
do you-
It's a statutorily required
It
committee
is?
for the
Yeah.
town.
Okay.
It's an ongoing committee, and it's not depending on whether or not there are any projects before that committee. But in the event that something comes up, that committee is there, such as the softball committee.
And it's, and they serve life terms?
No.
No, you're gonna resubmit to.
There's been discussion about that because there are terms that are technically expired, but the person is still there and the town attorney, Rob Avina, was like, well, they're there and so be
It's
it.
a town bylaw?
The state requires a town meeting.
Yeah, it's a, you wanna fit
No.
in? Yeah, it's a town run, it's a town committee, it's
Yeah.
not a Board of Ed
Right.
committee. I know it has the word school in it, by statute is a function of the town of Waterford, and,
So it
It's-
really comes under the selectman's office?
I don't know which office, or if it's just under the auspices of the town as a whole. I know there's Board of Finance members on it, RTM members are on it, Board of Ed. And I believe the Selectman's office does get an appointment to that committee.
There might be, if the state statute, there might be an ordinance for
Yeah,
it somewhere.
there is an ordinance for it as well. It's statutorily required to be enacted when a town is accessing state of Connecticut funds to build schools, and then there's other opportunities that are optional, like a softball field, where there's no state money involved, but the town, because of the cost and magnitude of the project, can choose to enact it, and in this particular case, they chose to enact it. Joe's been attending those meetings, as has Mr. Minor, and as has Mr. Merriman, and others. And they're moving, I would say, as rapidly as they can.
Oh, yeah. No, this is flying. It is, it really is. Capital projects, guys, a project of this size should take 3 to 4 years before you're completed. You guys are gonna wrap it up in 2.
Right, yeah, it was really nice to see how quickly that did move along.
So it doesn't take time from the Board of Ed meetings, like during the Board of Ed meetings, there's no discussion on those committee minutes necessarily? It doesn't take time here?
Well, you report out.
Yeah.
You report out what happens at the meeting. So as an example, I did sat on the Learn board representing Waterford. So each month I report to the board here what happens at Learn. So Craig does Atlantic Broadband, so he would report out what would happen. So it's a good committee to get on because you don't really meet. Yeah, we're talking.
Plus there's another softball
They
field.
do have a full
it out.
scheduled meeting. So, yeah, with the softball field, we had, at the first meeting, we brought in a proposal from someone who went through the correct process, and that's ultimately where we went and actually ended up in a very good place through that, so.
So the softball field is not an ad hoc committee?
It is,
Okay.
yeah.
It's ad hoc, so it's not related to building.
We had our own feasibility committee where we talked about it, here and just decided which path we're gonna go, and that took a while. And then when it was presented along the way, we got to the RTM and Mr. Stewart suggested we go through the school building committee. And I think at first there's that, like Joy was saying, is like, oh, another layer, we're gonna be here forever, and it was quick, surprisingly. So, there's a lot of debate, some heated debate, and we all got through it. All went well.
So we do need a motion for executive session.
Need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Yep, it should be read, just for FOI reasons, who the board is inviting in the purpose.
I move that the Waterford Board of Education go into executive session and invite Mr. Gerard and Mr. Mancini for the purpose of discussion